This week, we're going to explore a little bit of a different side of the security and compliance discussion. We're going to focus not so much on the rules of businesses following security and compliance requirements, but on the rules they need to follow to enable their employees and users to actually gain access to information technology systems. To explore this topic, we are joined today by Mr. Joe Brinkley, who is also known as the Blind Hacker. So join us as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly. RSA offers business-driven security solutions that provide organizations with a unified approach to managing digital risk that hinges on integrated visibility, automated insights, and coordinated actions. RSA solutions are designed to effectively detect and respond to advanced attacks, manage user access control, and reduce business risk, fraud, and cybercrime. RSA protects millions of users around the world and helps more than 90% of the Fortune 500 companies thrive and continuously adapt to transformational change. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/RSA Security.
Welcome to episode number 26 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on April 28th, 2020. I am your self-isolating host, Mr. Jeff Mann, and joined with me today are my co-hosts, also self-isolating in their little parts of the world, Mr. Scott Lyons, Mr. Josh Marpet, and Mr. Matt Altman. Gentlemen, welcome.
Day 2 of the easing restrictions in Colorado, but I can't tell the difference. So
I was going to ask, does anybody remember the last time they actually took a shower?
Yes, it was like last week or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Sweet.
You know, it was funny. I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw that the PR firm for the Death Star announced that they're extremely pleased that they've completely eradicated COVID-19 on Alderaan.
Oh, God. Talk about spin.
Nice.
Actually, it's in Delaware. It's worse. Today is the first day you're mandatorily required to wear a mask outside if you're over 13.
Yeah, we've been doing that for a couple weeks now in Maryland. Hey, before we jump into our discussion, I do have a couple announcements to make. Are you going cloud native? See how to integrate application security in our next webcast with Signal Sciences. Also, learn how penetration testing reduces risk in our May webcast with Core Security, which is a help systems company. Apparently they got acquired recently. Register for our upcoming webcasts or virtual trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/webcasts. You can also access our on-demand library of previously recorded webcasts and trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/on-demand. Each webcast you watch, you will earn 1 CPE credit. To get that, you just have to give us your ISC squared number, and we'll go ahead and submit that on your behalf. Also, we have officially migrated our mailing list back to our original platform. We have our categories nailed down, and you are now able to customize what you receive from us based on your preferences by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe. Go there, click the button to join the list. Once you've joined, you will also be able to go back and update your interests so that we can grow with you as you progress through your journey in InfoSec. All right. As we mentioned in the preview to this episode, the prelude, we are joined today by Mr. Joe Brinkley. Joe is known within the security community as the Blind Hacker. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great. We appreciate you taking the time from your busy schedule, and we have no ill feelings about the fact that you bailed on us at the last minute last week. We held our own, and we're not holding that against you. And we're glad that you got things worked out and you're able to join us again this week.
Absolutely, absolutely. When last week was unfortunate, it was just moments before we were supposed to go get on the call, I believe, and things started going awry with clients. And when business comes up, it comes first.
Yep, absolutely. We understand that here at Security Weekly Productions, and we're nimble. At least in production, we're nimble. I can't say that I'm nimble, and I'm not going to say anything about Josh's nimbility. Is that a word?
Agility.
Thank you. Anyway, so Joe, starting off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into the business of cybersecurity, what you do, and then we'll migrate into talking a little bit about this thing that you do on the side called the blind hacker.
Alrighty. So, for me, started off as a standard IT security engineer because back in the early 2000s, there was no cybersecurity. There was no penetration testers. Everything was based on a defense in-depth strategy, and everybody was part of the operations team. So as I came up through the ranks and worked my way through some things at different various government agencies and places along the way, eventually now became a director of offensive security. And what that really means is I'm just responsible for product delivery at the firm I'm at. And we put out standard issue red teaming and penetration testing, vulnerability assessing, and compliance reports. It's kind of always a passion of mine to be on computers. So long story short, I only started losing my vision at 16, but I was into computers before that. Thought I really wanted to join the Navy. Great thing about losing your vision is nobody in the military wants you because you have to be combat ready. Lost my vision at 6 days after my 16th birthday very rapidly due to Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. If you look that up, it's a really big word. All it just means is my optic nerve doesn't have the mitochondrial cells in it to grab all the data it sees and precisely focus it into through the nerve into my brain. So that's why I use assistive adaptive technologies, and kind of been that way since I was 16, and here it's been 20 years later.
Wow. I would Google the word. I'm just not sure how to begin spelling the word. But that's okay.
It's for short LHON for those that are curious.
I am curious. So we like to start our show off by asking all of our guests the same question. I realize we're having a little bit of a different type of discussion about security and compliance today, but we are just interested in getting your take on this thing that we call the security and compliance continuum. Just, where do you fall in terms of security versus compliance? No right or wrong answers, just your thoughts.
So a lot of people like to go around and say compliance is not security, but I can tell you that compliance can drive security. At portions of my career, I have been the policy writer for programs and projects that I was on. So, at first when I first got introduced to it and was told to write my first security SSP, and they this is what it should look like, and this is what you build. I was like, this is stupid. Who's going to follow these? And then turn around and, a handful of years later, I was able to finally go, hey, you guys need to be doing penetration testing. You guys need to be following these things because your program and your entire policy says that we're supposed to be doing these things at quite a bit more frequent basis than you're doing. Was able to drive home some security using compliance.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for your response and your thoughts on that question. It's not inconsistent with the way some of us feel about security and compliance. I have one or two questions, just sort of shift gears into this blind hacker thing. First of all, silly question, but I feel like I want to ask it because I try to make sure I'm using correct terminology. So what is the current in vogue, proper, appropriate, politically correct way of referring to people such as yourself that have some sort of I don't even know what you call it. That's why I'm asking.
Visual
Disability.
impairment.
Visual
Call him
impairment.
Joe.
So
I mean,
I'm legally blind, visually impaired. So that's why I felt safe grabbing the pseudonym, the blind hacker, because ultimately, being legally blind, I can't operate a motor vehicle. Legally, certain things that the law prevents me from doing because my visual acuity is the scale, and then there's me. So
I love the fact that you
visual
stated that you
impaired,
can't
low
legally
vision.
operate.
What's that?
I love the fact that you stated very carefully, I can't legally operate a motor vehicle, but hey, come on. I'm just saying.
Well, the issue with that is to operate a Segway or some of these electric scooters in certain counties and places, you're supposed to have a driver's license if you're over the age of 16, and you're not even supposed to operate them in some places if you're under the age of 18 without a driver's license. Well, I've used them before, to get around some of the larger cities, but that was out of scope. Have I ever driven a car? No, actually. So again, because I started doing the whole, I'm in a parking lot, my mid 15, 15 years old, 6 months. And then I never kind of graduated to the road. And then, like I said, I went to go take my driver's test, or my driver's test. And you put your eyes to the little thing and go A, E, I. Oh, I can't read the rest of it anymore. And it literally almost overnight, the rest of it went away. And so I just legally never operated a motor vehicle.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I was actually looking for a little bit more of a generic response. I mean, we're going to be talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act today at some point, and in terms of how companies can and should be in complying with those statutes or that statute. Is it still in vogue? I mean, most of the people that I meet that have some sort of disability, by definition, don't consider themselves to be disabled. So is the term still something you should use or not use, and what is the alternative?
Again, disabled is fine. Ultimately, from a standard society definition, I can't do something, so therefore I'm disabled. I do view myself. I did talks in public, Hacking While Blind, where I talk a little bit more in depth about the technology and things that I use. And I just consider myself differently abled because I'm able to do a job. I'm able to do the things that I do. So.
Got you. I appreciate that. I try to be sensitive sometimes, even though Josh and Scott think I'm pretty insensitive based on our pre-air discussion.
No.
We don't think you're insensitive. We just think you're hilarious with your people skills.
Yeah, and plus, cyber insurance. I mean, who's going to be sensitive about that? I mean, come on.
PCI, what?
All right.
Oh, my.
Do any of my hosts have any questions for Joe?
Well, so, one of the things I know that when we were building security software, one of the requirements that comes out, Joe, you can probably talk about a little bit, is it was the Section 508 requirements, right? That's for the accessibility requirements for software. Right. And I remember, having worked for a number of vendors, I always knew this was one of those things on the back burner, right? It was one of those things you kind of got to when you wanted to get into certain federal agencies because of Americans with Disability Act. I think it's a requirement in there. Talk a little bit about Section 508. I mean, what do people do, don't do? What's the level of requirements there? Can you give us any guidance there? Because it's always been one of these interesting areas that we haven't, most of the companies I work for haven't dug into very deeply.
I absolutely can. So one of the that's actually a really good question. I like it. Here's the thing. As you said, 99% of the time, for a professional company, meaning someone who produces software for security for professional purposes, not going to name any vendors, they don't care. 508 is the last thing on their mind. The reason that I've been able to function so well at my job is the limited vision that I do have allows me to still see the screen extraordinarily ballooned up. But I will tell you, if I was fully blind, there are certain name brand mainstream softwares that I would not have a chance to use. There's no way. And personally, I don't have enough clout to reach out to them to tell them, hey, can you guys do better? I'm slowly getting there throughout time, as we said, adopted the name Blind Hacker. So that happened, August 2018. And I really bit into it because, it became who I am. I wasn't, just Joe B anymore. I was doing this because I'm visually impaired and trying to show people being differently able doesn't prevent them from completing the jobs that they want to do, either as a penetration tester, a red teamer, forensics, DFI, so on, so on. So a lot of the software in those categories, unless it's CLI driven, is just not usable.
Mm. And so I assume you use tools in your day job that are either command line interface or you can figure out how to use them without being 508 compliant?
Yeah, so there is, back in I'll say years ago, a certain very popular vulnerability scanner was not 508 compliant remotely. So I built a tool that would interface with the API and go in the back end and run the scans for me, do the things I needed, bring me the results, create XML, email it to me, and then be able to use a parsing tool that I built as well to tell me, kind of more or less what was going on. I've shared that with people that are entirely blind, and they've loved it. Now that tool specifically, much better interface, HTML5, not quite great on the 508 compliance, just in readability per line, per, top to bottom reading, left to right reading. But they've gotten a lot better. You can at least get the data now. Other pieces of toolage, large vulnerability and exploitation vendors, still more or less, when you use a physical app still based on the desktop, it's extraordinarily tough unless you build it in. When you move to the web interface, interfacing with an API and a command line that then brings you the data on a web page, it's a lot friendlier, it's a lot better, but it's still not like, again, having the limited vision I have in the years of experience with it, I get where it's at. If I were to try to introduce somebody brand new, there's going to be varying levels of understanding of where the data might be at physically
right.
or relative to a screen location.
Right. Yeah, because you have to kind of know which cells have which data, so you know how to kind of know where it's at, so you know how to parse it or whatever you have to do to build your tools. And I think I know which tool that is. Hopefully they didn't lock down the APIs on you like they did most of the other people.
They did, but it's again, it's one of those things that work around. There's a lot of free open source vendors. I got to highlight the some of the guys from the Bloodhound. That was a tool that I did actually complain about stuff in their Slack, and they immediately said, "Oh, by the way, here's this command line ingester version that has these other things," and then other people grabbed that capability and wrote other miniature tools that can focus on, do I want to go for domain admin? Do I want to go for machines that are easier to exploit? Do I want to go machines that are missing patches? And so using Bloodhound, you just drop the ingester, it brings it down. And instead of popping up in the Neo4j, which is very visual and GUI heavy, now I just drop it in the command line tool and say, this is the things that are important to me. And then it brings me that data back.
Joe, let me ask you a question. And I'm going to sort of push back a little bit. I should tell you that I have a little bit of background. My mother was a NARA certified instructor. That's North American Riding for the Handicapped Association. So I was actually a sidewalker and leader. We worked with physically handicapped people as well as people with developmental disabilities and some significantly handicapped. So it's every single person that we worked with had an individualized set of needs and abilities. And so you're talking about some of the things that work for you, which are command line interfaces work much easier for you because they're text heavy. So things that are text heavy for you are the best. Okay, I get that. That makes sense. You can read them. I don't know if you use a Braille reader or a magnifier or whatever, but command line interface means it's text. You can read it. You don't have to balloon it beyond comprehension to see the GUI. But for somebody that has a physical limitation where they have no control of their hands, they're using for example, a mouse stick to peck at a keyboard or to indicate what they need to be typing. A GUI might be better. And so I guess my point is, it's not everything should be command line interface. It's that it depends on.
I don't believe that either.
No, I know. I'm sorry. I wasn't saying you were. I just wanted to point out that there's an individualized set of needs for each person. Does that make sense? And I'm sorry if I came across badly.
Oh, no, absolutely. There's you're right. There's a lot of, because the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA Act, 508 compliance covers everybody from physical, like you said, to mental, developmental. And by the way, it is one of the hardest things to comply to. I will say a major shopping retailer named off of used to be a book company, right? They themselves don't have the ability, as big as they are, as much money as they have. Most of their site isn't 508 compliant. Most of their tools are not 508 compliant. There's certain things that, even throwing, billions upon billions of dollars at it still isn't going to get them to the place that every single person is going to be able to use the site without issue. And I understand that. But that's why the talk with, if you have the ability to have an API, leave it open, make it commented out, or document it somewhere that I have the ability to generate the data that I need to see, or people see, relatively speaking, or people entirely blind to lightly blind have the ability to pull that data down. But those, again, leaving the main interfaces there for those people of regular usage to, as you said, maybe just a mobility difference, and instead of using a mouse, they use a straw, a iMice movement, anything, right? So right. The data's there. It just needs to be accessible to everyone, which would be the great thing. But I get it's tough.
No, so I like your point, which is, the one step that a website, a tool developer, software development company, just about anybody can do is leave the API open so that accommodating programs can be utilized to use that API. Am I vaguely correct there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, example, I've tried to help students before. They come to me and say, hey, I see you're the blind hacker. I've seen heard some of your streams. I've understood the things you talked about. So I decided to, this year, I was going to take a forensics course. And I was like, fantastic. So forensics, kind of already in Linux forensics, already CLI, a lot of these things. Well, my course only teaches with some of the Windows C-based tools that have no CLI. They are a GUI, and they grab metadata, and you go from there. How can I do that same work? So I was like, well, here's the alternative tools. Well, my professor doesn't know them, so I won't be able to be graded on them. So to me, that was a deficiency amongst the professor and a deficiency amongst the program.
I teach forensics. I have taught forensics for years. And if you don't know a whole slew of tools, you're not a competent professor. Sorry. You may have a core curriculum that mandates you use NCASE because you're a law enforcement school or whatever, but you should be able to at least accommodate with tools that are CLI. Hell, NCASE has a CLI, I believe. I'll have to double check.
Yep.
But you've got to be able to use alternative tools, Autopsy, SleuthKit. There's a dozen tools out there for anything you want to do. Okay, maybe except volatility. But, I totally agree. That professor needed to be smacked.
I mean, not just volatility. I mean, there's other ways of grabbing memory from RAM. You could just DD the RAM. There's, so many alternatives, but the fact that the professor wasn't able to do that. So, that's silly. And again, that kind of, I could tell you the story about the time that I went to university when I still lived in Maryland and said, hey, I'm 18. I lost my vision 2 years ago. Help me out. And so a lot of you guys know me now. I'm very technical and know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. And I don't share this story often, but when I went to this university and I sat down, and there I am in the entrance exam, and one of their things is to build a computer. Well, because the person going over the exam, the proctor going over the exam, saw that I was using my feel. By the way, I put the whole computer together. It booted up and operated, and I installed the operating system on it. But because I screwed in hard drives, because I looked at the CPU and knew that the gold corner goes in the other gold corner, and instead of looking, I just knew that I knew where it was. These are things that I just knew. I implanted in memory and just built computers still, even visually impaired. Right. And because I put it together, he told me I'd never make it in this industry. And I believed that for a while. So from 18 to 20, I was not in the cyber industry. I was not in the computer industry. I wasn't remotely computer related. And then finally, going forward, I said, that's my passion. I've got to do this. And, we've already discussed the rest of the history, but fortunately somebody gave me a chance and the rest is history. So to me, it breaks down a lot of time with people not understanding those individual needs. And because there isn't clear compliance written on what does a person with a visual impairment need. Oh, they just need alt text. Well, not entirely true. A person with a physical disability who uses or mobility disability who uses a mobility controller instead of a mouse. Well, they need these things. Well, always not entirely true. It's hard to do it, and I do get that. But I would love to see people taking it a little bit more seriously, because there's no reason that people with a differently able, with visual or hearing impaired or physical mobility shouldn't be able to do these jobs. Our brains work just as well. And, everybody's like, oh, you're missing the one sense, is everything there? No, our brains work just as well. We just can focus a little bit more on particular things. That's really what it boils down to, right? So, by the way, InfoSec Daredevil almost became the name, but I decided against that. Just went with the blind hacker. Just saying.
Is there a legally blind, visually impaired equivalent to a squirrel? Or maybe your brain works better than ours. A quick question for you, and then we'll take a break. You talked about a lot of the software doesn't have this stuff built into it to help you out. Are there, and maybe this is a longer answer, maybe we'll save it for the break and you just give us a teaser, but what are some of the tools that are available that are sort of ancillary tools that help you use other software, and or what are some things out there that actually do satisfy compliance and help you do your job by getting helping to enable you to be on a computer?
Oh, absolutely. The quick answer is modern day technology has come a long way. There is built-in screen zoom in almost every operating system I've used: Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, so on and so forth. There is screen readers built into each one of those same things. Screen zoom, colorblind modes. There's a large set of tools out there. Just kind of understanding the tool that you need to the operating system that you're using, and then just getting as familiar with it as you possibly can, because you're going to have to remember at some point that's your eyes, that's your ears, that's the thing that is augmenting the lack of the sense that you have. So
great. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and continue the discussion with the blind hacker.